Hamondo Baja one of Josan de Jasan Yasin Batin, Jeffrey, Jokulan, Juan, did just Lamazo and the Poncho Jati, Mazan Balan, Jabaya. Today, Jebrim and the Deba, you know, Javazo and the Nasinam that is on a few years and you love my Jabona. Gachizam Bacha, that old change of all the Senor, so that was in Bay of this and other brother. So then, Jing on your job, but you meet old change on all the Mahova, Julia, and Bardama, the Jit or you go to Kuyon, the Regina Majo. Such a dirty job as of that and other party, and one of the moment goes on to Jigos and other measurements are going to look at something like that. Change. Don't make bon Javaji, as was some Jino, then you're the Dachino, and Baju, in the Ah, eh, King watch you, they pretend to roll on that. They pay by them. How much does she drink you?
Khenpo Rinpoche and all the Dhamma brothers and sisters and friends, first of all, I would like to wish you all Tashi Dilek.
You know, I'm a woman which you go, you know, that's enough. You know, something like Zomba, Zomba, don't you, but Tabi, the land, that's a more. You know, Maranilla. Chimbo, your marriage, just depachim, Kupachimbo, Adopchimbo, you teach him should I your married. All then tell him at all the Japan. All then take up some more.
All you Dhamma friends, we are gathered together here, and this gathering is a purposeful gathering. This gathering is a precious gathering. I am by no means a very learned person, but you have a lot of devotion and trust in me. And you are very heroic in your activities. And although I am not a learned person, the fact that we are gathered together here is indeed very, very precious.
You know, there is a home, Tenisha, Tenis had it on the Chujo, Top, Sumba Carpet, Sumba, then by years, Umberto Tangiava Carpetini, but Chuba so much of the geometry, Tamba the Javin Lasso, so at Then it Homer Dimba Jade. Song that any young thing in the joke from Massonware, take on the council, then the Mars, Jones, Opa, Lambs, or take the song that any young thing in the joke. This is non song Pena. That you say, Sajichu, Tavanta Correa.
The topic for tonight's teaching is the Buddha's first turning of the wheel of Dharma. That is to say, the Buddha's teaching on the Four Noble Truths. Because of the aspirational prayers of the gods, samsaric gods like the Indra and Brahma, Gautama Buddha got out of his contemplation and gave this wonderful teaching on the Four Noble Truths. These truths are the truth of suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and path leading to the cessation of suffering. And after having given these teachings on the Four Noble Truths, Buddha went back into his samadhi or contemplation. We talk in terms of the Four Noble Truths. Each Noble Truth has further four truths, and each is exponentially then greater in terms of each is multiplied fourfold. So in this way, when we get down to the discussing the fine detailed teachings on the Four Noble Truths and their various aspects, then the scholarly and the learned ones can go on and on and on, because the subject matter is very, very profound. The reason why the subject matter is so profound is because the afflictive emotions of the sentient beings living or existing in the sixth cyclic existence is equally profound. We refer to this cyclic existence as the ocean-like suffering of sentient beings, the ocean-like samsaric existence. Though the profundity of the Four Noble Truths are in proportion to the profundities of the samsaric existence.
The longer the bad, the longer the balatin, thank you, Pachatan, and Sanjika, Tama, that you've been touched on that, you also do about something. Be corporate, Congress saying that that simply charm Balatini, Rewatan, Deba, Kashig, Tetom, Kashig, Lota, the Lazopa, Kashig, Mumbar, Homan, the baby, the Laranga, Tetom, Toxella Sopa, Tegore, the Tampia, Sanjika, Dutching, Tamemare. The
teaching passed down by our historical Buddha, those that appear in the Sutrayana tradition that are orally passed down by the Buddha, are the teachings that are expounded by the learned followers of the Buddha. All these teachings came about as a means of meeting the needs of individual sentient beings who had different expectations, different needs and wants, who had different skepticism and doubts, some of whom had even wrong view. So in order to right all these wrongs, the vast number of teachings are categorized and compiled and put together in the sutras are called the pronouncements or the teachings imparted verbally by the historical Buddha.
Shirap member Tamjek, Yamselin to Marvez and Theo Mare, Yamselin Batamjek Tonta, Charona Benaco, or Dungar Shiparsa, Young Pawansa, or Dungakin, you go, you body, then a new Batamje, Bangra, Tena te nyumu pati jo nyumu pali dungayi na kumchung pangwar sa ngokpa ngut sa jane dungayi go na jo mango na rewa mango jo mango na rewa go juyo mare ti tena pene jo nyumu mango kore so ole teni ngokpa la lam song te ta ngokpa tap naban haso song jare di bai je teni song ole ngokpa ngut sa so lam jangwar sa song teni tsik 앙리레네리 이래가 셀 거다. 냠슬 힘바 탐제게 변나. tatsamde te nga tso kaya tabja shige yore bene tati dine teta tin kena ma shigore de
If the teachings, the Four Noble Truths, are so profound, then does that mean to say that those who do not have a great deal of intelligence or mental capacities are not going to be able to fathom the depth of all these teachings? No, it does not mean that. What Buddha tells us is that we should, first of all, recognize that suffering exists. After recognizing the existence of suffering, the next step is that we should give up the habits that bring about the root cause of this pain and suffering. And in doing that, if we are to give up, if we are to do away with the pain and suffering, the only way how we can actually do away with pain and suffering is when we put an end to the very cause or causes that bring about pain and suffering. That is why, after recognition of the suffering, the truth of suffering, then we should abandon or give up all the habits that give rise to the pain and sufferings, which is the causes of these pain and sufferings. So therefore, in order to put an end to pain and suffering, we have to first of all practice the abandonment of the causes and conditions that bring about pain and suffering. Unless if we are able to put an end to the unleashing of negative emotions or afflictive emotions, there's no way how we can put an end to pain and suffering. And then the last one is the method of putting an end to the causes and conditions of this pain and suffering, which calls for the path leading to the cessation of the causes of pain and suffering. So Buddha teaches us to, practice the path which enables one to put an end to the pain and suffering. So, in this way, although one is not a highly learned person, as a practitioner, we can apply these teachings, and there is a way to put an end to pain and suffering.
리스는 다당 초삼체변나 심지 몽바서 사제 타게 가리되는 몽바이네 레 좀되데 사고 마시네 대와다 대외죠 강이마 올레 마시 대드 마시 바래 두개게 저데 빵 마시네 되니 올레 대와 도장 동해래라 좀 두개를 대와도 그요 두개라더니 동해게 다랑 코나 듭고요래 되게 되는 오 먹네 빼라 줍줬던 두 바지 같은 가가송 하더니 라블롱 오 먹지 빼라 되게 심지 먹봐 송고요래
We sentient beings are labeled as ignorance. Ignorant because we fail to understand the cause and effect relationship. Although we aspire to have happiness and causes of happiness, we fail to achieve happiness. Although we do not want pain and suffering, we fail to put an end to pain and sufferings. In fact, we do the opposite of things that we aspire, things that we need, and things that we want. In this way, we are labeled as ignorant sentient beings, because we do the opposite to what we aspire.
Le jimde la mishi chitana chu sami je khada yang zuborda rok chami je nam kha tongwa la ka lo de je wa mu dok sang de rang gi ning tha pa ni le jimde le yi chi ma che ne chu xie ba de ni cha pa me ban rok ke nang ji re so pe na ni jimde le yi chi me wa ge ni da ni yi chi ma che na ni do ge je ta de wa jo kha ka chi ma shi na ni da kang mi kang 강문들 빠져 다 연구요래 변 올래 대동지 적학하는 마시네 되니 너바 대완도 장 르저다 동에 또 빈저트니 뭐뭐 되니 연구요래 변아 다만이 좀 제일 지키고 와 동대래
Garchen Rinpoche, the founder of Digung Kagyu lineage, gives a teaching on the cause and effect relationship. He went on to say that one who does not have an inkling of what the cause and effects are, and without this understanding, if you give Dharma teachings, it is, he said, like the wishing for the thundering sound where there is no rain in sight. If you do not have a thorough understanding of cause and effect relationship, you will not be able to then do the things that bring about happiness and do the things that will enable you to abandon the pain and suffering. So first requirement is to have a thorough belief and thorough understanding of cause and effect.
Teni tela thomar tatadi thomar dunga shibar sa teni ni nemgyu mata choruk na song de dunge shibade kangri de nang simbe de na teni se yoki na bana so la teni teni kechi rela chegyo kechi rela jukyo re tera ole neka se yoki deungo la teni pene idongo yo la teni pena deva chegyo le ido mongpa le teni dama chegyo dama chegam ji dunge ga nam ji dama cha de le ta teni re tena.
Buddha teaches us by telling us, he says, recognize suffering. So when we say suffering, what is suffering? Suffering is something you feel in your mind stream. And it happens on a continual basis. Suffering or emotions can come to your mind instantly. When you see something which is appealing to your senses, it's going to bring a happy feeling. When you experience something that is not quite appealing to your senses, or when you come across something which is aversion, it is going to then generate aggression. And when you have aggression or aversion, the nature of aversion and aggression is suffering.
tata dewa ta dunghi disu rangi shi sona kechik rila pena nakuti bata vare ole seyo ji na bata tole jewi guna o nda mataba ramji yinba shi sona sembi nero sangsina dewa yang mataba ramji dunghi yang mataba ramji ko takwa yo mare takwa me ba shi suma te ke pena dungi ke pena ne ba yo mare gang yin pena ko te takwa sem jin ne te sem la ke se yi jin ne te takwa sem jin na ne te ke le ta pena no ko yo re gang yin de dungi na pa sem jung ko yo re pena te le jin ne te ni da di ro wa ro de jung ko yo re pena da ten ji
When you have an experiential understanding of what suffering is, then this emotion, this feeling is something like the space, the cloud formation in the sky. You understand that the very nature of suffering as well as pain and pleasure as well as happiness is impermanent. When you have this understanding of the nature of mind, then both happiness and suffering are impermanent. When you have this experiential understanding of what impermanence is all about, then whatever kind of emotions you face, these will not impact you. When you do not have clinging attachment to your emotions, the emotions will not have any effect on you. There are 3 different types of sufferings. Out of these sufferings arises the 6 cyclic existence.
Perna, tata so di lari so di men songore. Dungi tam ki melam pashata vare. Melam ngoni pashatong pena. Dieta ngotong khoba thoma me bane. Lor do kasaka songre. Dungi nabana so tang me ba nyongore. Nyong no pena so jebe dungi nyongore ke. Tata tingi o mare. Gang chokyo o mare. 이는 다다는 것도 등에 지와 탐지 양은 예배 지지에는 빼놓고 되는 내가 지나 양가 게모게 게자시고 양들 가서 왔지요 요래 양 등에다 강이라 소바티나 다다 시작 미탐지에는 빼나 문지에게 등에 지나 라서 주고 봤던 빼나지 문지에게 등에 검듯이 뭐설라 이게 자신이 망보요래 뒤 탐지 sempre 안빈 지네 되라 남도랑 뭐 보는지네 빼놓고 In the 37 Bodhisattva practices, there is one stanza which says, all sufferings are like the death of a son in one's own dream. We existed from the beginningless samsara. We have taken many, many different life forms, but we do not recall them. For example, when the kind of pain and suffering we faced at the time of our birth, none of us remember. And all this suffering, when you start to dwell in the past, or even if it is pleasant memories, when you start dwelling in the past, when you remember something that had happened long time ago, which brings you happy memories, that you are happy about it. Conversely, when you remember something that is very unpleasant, it is going to cause you to generate very, very strong negative emotions, lot of suffering, and sometimes to the extent of wanting to commit suicide. Many people who have sought a private audience with me have related these things to me. These are all whether it is good or bad, whatever kind of memories you have, all these are conceptualized thoughts. If you cling onto these, then these are going to have impact on you. Tani tina tata dungi namba sum so. Dungi namba sumi na pena tata ni song sum je dungi ke dungi eso. Dunga ke dunga le he pena. Kaangli dine pena pena supo na nata dupo dune titina so pere yada dande ma ke dunga re pe bata do lipo ma chi bodu to de titina pena yang ni jabu de dungi ke dungi dina 도르든 반참 매비 동해래 반참 싸워는 매와 누구에게 토고 동해라 되니 반참 매비 동해에서 미송선 되니 토리즘 제 동해를 빼나 기르비 동해야서 빼나 네와다 동해 디마 빼나 토리게 동해를
Suffering, there are three different kinds of sufferings. The kind of suffering that one faces in the three lower realms of existence is called the suffering of suffering. Now, what is a suffering of suffering? It is, for example, like disease or sickness. Take the example of a cut and laceration. There is already this cut which is making you uncomfortable, but then if you start to scratch it, it is going to add more discomfort. So in summary, what it means is continuous suffering in the three lower realms of existence. The next kind of suffering is called the suffering arising out of changes that take place in our lives. These kind of sufferings relate to the suffering faced by those who are born in the three higher realms of existence, which means a mixture of happiness and suffering.
pēnda tātāna tō tēnī lāṃ kāngni jōngdā yāṃ tōpa dungī lāpka yōre chūruk yidā kē tērē dungī tē dungī māshī na dungī tē kāngni jōngi jē pēna kō nātā tē dungī māshī na nē kī jē tē tēnī kūpī tāp yō mārē pē tē tā mārē pēnda kī tōngsam jē dungī yō nyāvā kē dungī tā mārē tēnī chūtū kāchā rīrī kē nā tēnī pēna kō 장미바 시야 장미바 수요래 배나 대탐질이야 같이 이시 제비제 요래 같이 대탐 제요래 배나 야나 여매 나서봐 대탐질 강리들랑 그 춘랑 그 레게 맞에는 세비 주고 이제 뇨모 받아 맞에라 대답에 두게도 용도 용이 봐요 샘고리 시지요 말에 샘들 때문에 레랑 박차되라 박차되 마다가 빠르디 동에도 용고요래 배나 다다당고서 사당 도고나라 소여매 들이 속찬다마다 세자다다 통구요래 참에 대탐지 소여매 시켜요래 동무보 대선제 등의 용지대 올해 등의 용피 열에 지나가 빼나 산지로 탑탑망보 용고요소는 무보다다 몇 통산의 요래 올해 대탐지 자와강 속에 빼나다 따다다라주게 뉴모바티 자와 솔직히라 동해의 마시는 유모바디 방도요 말에 동해 솔직히 유모바디 별이 문제네 이 방주 체대 동해 시발사서 근데다 로와로 레리 동해를 롭게 다 되래
In all our teachings, the first and foremost instruction is on the recognition of suffering. If you do not recognize and understand what suffering is all about, then it is like being afflicted with some kind of disease, and if you do not have the ability to diagnose that particular condition, you will not be able to prescribe remedies for curing it. Likewise, if you do not understand the very cause of suffering, you will not be able to do anything to put an end to pain and suffering. The suffering that exists in the realm of hell, for example, it is said that on a continuous basis, on a split-second basis, the countless number of beings are born and the countless number of beings are dying. Of course, there are individuals and cases of doubts and skepticism about this. But you can be assured that for as long as the delusion is not exhausted, or when the delusion of the sentient being does not come to complete depletion, there will always be the karmic appearances of pain and suffering which one would experience. Like buried deep under the ground or embedded in rocks, there are countless number of insects and living beings trapped. While there is the question of, yes, these insects and beings are alive, and then there are those who contend that these insects trapped in rocks are not alive but dead. Our Buddha has taught us that some of these insects trapped in rocks, for example, will live for tens of thousands of years, trapped and alive in rocks. These are the things that we can actually witness ourselves. If you do not appreciate and recognize the pain and suffering, you will not want to abandon afflictive emotions. So one of the reasons why we are introduced to the pain and suffering and the causes so that we would want to put an end to these.
Tila da tati dungi da kamne ngusum da tang so pen ji da ga dungi da cha jana ngusum sema da tang so mek thongchu de je be rang bu chung tham che ne pe la awle je tham che ja mek thong san kha la je be da khong so ti kom dungi ti da me ba wa na ji yo ba de ko zuk chung ta ne pe la khala yor kang de ko ne ti ko to sa ju ka wa me ba ti thong ni ding ni ma re le 아수일 말을 시도고 요래 변에 대다가 담지 동일 삼로다나 오늘 대다 저 강에서 대다 담지 다다 소소를 하기를 요바가 변에 뉴모 받다 삼로다나 오 집에 저도 무슨 하기를 듣고 요래 대다가 동일 뛰는 진짜에 능지네 변에 동일이 실라대 방 탑대 소식이 변에 대르더니 동일 종지대 하도 귀치 모래 동일이 출력을 좋아요 변에 대다가 다다는 변에 대다가 걔네 동일다 강의를 되니 출력을 망보여래 오래 갑자기 내가 대해서 대화요나 변화 생각하게 유아사들은 되게 롱주바별로 소바요나 대탐절 가이나 다다 변화 하나지게 오래 출력 맡아 대탐절 마음바로 동일 용후고요래 변에 대다 원도 동일의 양상한테 롭 동일 시골에 대해서
There are countless number of beings, like very tiny insects, for example, which are going through a lot of pain and suffering, hunger, thirst, etc. But the size is so small in proportion to their size, their needs and wants, the need for food, and the thirst and hunger, these are just absolutely overwhelmingly big. But because of their size, they cannot eat enough to satiate their hunger and thirst. They are born and live very, very short period of time and pass away. And during their short span of life, they go through a lot of pain and suffering. And we have all these causes. We have all the negative emotions or afflictive emotions which bring about the very cause of these kind of pain and suffering. So therefore, it is important to first of all understand what pain and suffering is all about, and how and why these pain and sufferings arise. Only then will one be able to find ways and means to put an end to the very habits and activities that bring about pain and suffering. So in this way, the pain and suffering, when treated in the right way, serve as a reminder that we have to be virtuous and conduct ourselves in conformity with the Dharma teachings. Sometimes when we undergo a lot of pain and suffering, or when we undergo difficulties, these difficulties and sufferings will help us to become virtuous and act in accordance or in conformity with the Dharma. Yes, because of one's own accumulation of past merit, when we get a respite, when we tend to enjoy our prosperity, good health, etc., for a brief period of time, these kind of good fortunes serve us only as a distraction rather than helping us to walk the path of Dharma. So it is important to recognize and feel the pain and suffering that exist in the six realms of existence.
그리고 저도 토리즘 등에나 다당고 처리게 말에 네가 총총적으로 동하다라 등에 장매 반용은 남는지 밤에라 드린 것이 됐다고 가브레 같아 있잖아. 다 대신 강바지를 갈아 좀 잡고요. 대양변에 됐다면 동에 변나 네와도 동에 이렇고 자차 고탕지나 자차는 네와 껴서 맞으면 자치 급제대 동에 그라비 받으니 배에 대답을 해. 토리점지 등아야 저배 동에서 마당 사이 동아야 돼. 대려서면 네 제가나지 동에 시칼을 좀 본거 동에 예. 원래 제기나지 동아 좀 본거 동아야. 하나 기와 가와 나와 기와 기게 내가 초이제로 왔지 갈지 본거도 족등 너가 등이 빼나
tempo는
tempo들 다 칼라 또 그쳤듯이 남님 팀에 봐 코바도 제와 tempo 제와도 나 매사 다 정도는 사 요도 tempo는 봐 사공진 좀나야 되니 샘들 동에 땅아 사는 따로 사고 사는 되고 선들이 동에 그 보여래 이 돈을 보드 메시 대고는 샘들 동에 들어와요 말이
We have some happiness and a peace in the three higher realms of existence. But ultimately, even these will bring about pain and suffering. We have a little bit of happiness and peace on this planet, for example, as a result of the fruition of our ceaseless effort. Daytime effort, nighttime effort, all the sacrifices, all the endurances. And if we divide up in terms of happiness and suffering, it'll be something like a 10 to 90 ratio. 10% will be happiness, 90% will be suffering. And this kind of happiness we experience on this planet, for example, is subject to changes. These happiness which are subject to changes are experienced by the likes of the gods and the humans, two being of the two higher realms of existence out of the three. Now, in terms of suffering that we face, we have the sufferings like associated with the birth, old age, sickness, death, in our ceaseless commotion and busyness, and pain and suffering arising out of scarcity of things. Although we are physically relaxing and sitting down, our mind is hurrying and scurrying. It is going every which way. That's it.
Then zoom ba tamchela ni chapan de ji de ge de pe ko zoom le sem de marik pe chu chapli zong de duge gram ji le ma de ba ko ba le ma de ba sa le da ji ko le xie ju mang bo yo de na 아랑 kin bo ju kong ma jo de nga ki da xin ge me ji ko pe xie ba mang bo yo le chapan de ji de ge ko le yo de xie ge me de xie da pe xie ba mang bo le de yang sul do ni le pang le sem de marik ba la ma dan de zong de zo yu rong me rong ni dung xi ge ram yi chap de yo le be di dung xi song lo so ji sem ge de lo ma do ko ba le me ni ko 마릭 바데 동해게라미래 들이 차반들 뒤지 동해데 동해데 동해 니 송섬 토리게 동해 개버 동해 들이 족메 바탐jel라 차반들 뒤지 동해.
The third kind of pain and suffering that faced is called the all-pervading suffering. All-pervading suffering is for as long as one is a samsaric being, the suffering pervades all living beings. A great deal can be talked about this, the existence of all-pervading suffering, non-existence of all-pervading suffering, and more in-depth, more kind of scholarly approach to this particular topic can be best perhaps given by someone like Garchen Rinpoche here. But in summary, for as long as there is ignorance, for as long as one has afflictive emotions in one's mind stream, then it is safe to say that suffering pervades all beings.
Tene teta we donge te nere jilio sona matabe chujin tang dong harwa tang ta kali donge nyong khi bo sere dire ta ta phungbo nga re so zok de le mi de phungbo nga ye pe la zok jo phungbo chobo phungbo du shi jo phungbo du ri jo phungbo number shi phungbo so pe la 제가 죽죽에 륜들이 되니 동해나 파사 초용들이 죽 기포로 등에 용주요 말 죽들이 초와요리 초와들이 되니 뉴시지가 요래더니 빼놓고 올래 내용 알아서 발라더니 올래 다 되고 칼라라데 세게 뉴시 그게 뉴시 도전 뉴시 작은 뉴시 탐비 뉴시를 거고 뉴시 뉴시는 뉴시를 되니 레소 뉴시 레소 빠지 변들의 초포가잖아. 다들 나 통진 단디시 야대 다음에 라베는 이제 통을 뉴지 봉보지. 대처를 해. 진이 더 담치 또 넘버 10 봉보서. 이 샘들이 이 봉보가 뭐지? 레레레레 이제 파트서나 강바 동바는 이제 봉보가 어디 딱 본 데리다. 남시 동주요 말이. 강바 동바다 그래서 매매 become what. Yeah. 저거야. 풍부가 하나다. 다저랑 이거 다음에 뵈지. 우리가 딱 보도 요말 다저 본데라 산이 다들은 미지 시소가 베테도 미지 시송들들이 풍부 참아 라들 파진 라들에 단단히 남시 메타는 풍부한 강바 동반는 일에 풍부가
When we undergo all this pain and suffering, now, who actually feels this pain and suffering? What actually happens when you have negative emotions? Consequently, you face pain and suffering. We can roughly say that it is the 5 aggregates or 5 skandhas which face all the pain and suffering. Now, what are the 5 skandhas? It starts off with the aggregate of form. One thing leads to the other in a progressive way. From form that arises feelings. Once you have a feeling, the feeling of, for example, towards your nears and dears, feeling towards those who do not exactly appeal to you. And when you put these feelings into action, then it is going to create a negative karma. The feeling I'm having towards, like a glass of water, a cup of water lies on my table. I see there is the foam. I feel there is water in it, in the foam. Now, out of this, there is a sense of grasping. I grab it and I take a sip. Now that is, an action is being done. An action or a karma is being created. Now from there, then of course you have to face the consequence. All in a cyclic fashion. And who actually does the suffering of this suffering? The consciousness. Otherwise, everything is just like an empty guest house. It is the consciousness that does not fade away or die. The consciousness leaves the rest of the body, the rest of the aggregates behind, just like an empty guest house.
나도 저기 나 집은 가 삼고요래. 노르진의 루셈니 초발 때는 가 열도 봐. 네게 답고 잡는더니 빼놓고 빼는지 강바지야 나든지나. 오, 강바지 되는 가게 윤이 정도 네 강바들 누바 땅다. 소시 룰은 누바 땅을 게다 세면 누고요래. 되는 이 풍보데 나도 정네. 나도 정도는 풍보 레레니 가리 풍보가 뭐 레레니 나를 들 찍 말이 이 말이 저 말이 참 나 강찍이라게 요 말이 야 다 되는 다 부모가 뭐 코랑 이형 빼놓고 다나 말이 되는 원래 공님 강바도 왔다 하면 차요래야 말이 다 강리 부모가 뭐 나쁘 그냥 빨리 다 말이 빼나 다 강들들 다 납시디야 다랑 그 셈을 쳤다 기다려 다요 말 하빼나 동반지를 결로를 되는 변나 남에 봐 동무보더니 너가 용케인다 용디 변나 무보도 다데 가와도 되나 대마도 봐시나 오사 그냥 고치 못 차지요 변나
남실 가래서 말하지
니 다도 풍부가 나니 다 풍부다지 이제 돼 속초반 되신 들지가 풍부 이제 다 배는 강바다가 차대로와
남시 가래서
다 남시대 다 낙보다가 차대로와 다 남시 많이 됐더니 다음에 배 강바다가 차대고 송도한테 매매배 강바다가 차대해 다 강바다가 제일 양자 딱 끼었다나 다 풍부하고 돈비랬더니 다 따지라고 하지 다 잘 해줘 말아 나하고 강내야 나 말을 봐
When you have this grasping to the 5 aggregates, then one by one, if you try to analyze, you have this notion that there is an inherently existing I. What is that inherently existing I notion? It is a combination of one's own physical body and the mind. And then we, in a deluded state of mind, think that there is such thing as an I which is independently or inherently existing. Like where you buy a house and immediately you associate yourself with that house and say, this house belongs to me, as if there is a me independently existing. From the time when you actually take possession of that house, whatever ever happens to the house is going to impact you, because there is this attachment, because one believes that the house belongs to an entity called I. Same thing with the 5 aggregates. We think that there's an entity called I, and all the 5 aggregates belong to this entity. What is form? This physical form belongs to me. Who is me? Is me or I independently or inherently existing? The answer to that question is no. So this idea of self is inherently devoid, inherently non-existing. So therefore the 5 aggregates are in essence like an empty house. The owner of the 5 aggregates is not self. Even the consciousness does not have self. The thing called self is not inherently existing. Last one.
Benedata, Michira and the Samotana. Oh, Mishipade, Lucemia Chopala, Michik Takado. The little Pa Yina Taketo. So long as you Taketo, Lucemia and Michik Takado. Tata Dicti coming to go take hotel, Luder didn't go to. Same corner can't go and do some. Same corner, they looked in, same corner, Nakata with Chad, they were. Muni Chani, Ludertini Penate go, same corner, Nakata is a Hakon Sana. Pardon at Interlang with the Pingi or a Pardon Lang Sharon, oh, Tatani de Batona, or Senator Lang Sharona. Then Tanang about Hakon. Tata Lude keep on seeing something. Tata Ditakitan, take that Penco. Oh, really get the case from that. Dame beton Hako Yore. That is Dami to push it up then Dame, but then Hako Yore. Particular pattern, oh, rang there of the Michigan. Then meeting Ubo race of some of time actually made a child. Oh, thank you, same Nakato Banagiri. I mean, I was on road, or you get a shake. Ubo, Major and Dog Madoxana. Madokina take 20 years and Dogian Ubon Motos on Meva. Nipara that need the same halfway, 3 towers, Penna. Young to young to town at the young.
When we look at a person, we generally have this tendency of labeling a person as a person or a human because of that person's physical body and that person's mind. The combination of the two we label as a human. Now, if you kind of observe carefully and separate the person's mind and the person's body, the person's mind is like the space, And it is the person's body that we serve on a constant basis. It is the body which is needing all the care and attention that we on a daily basis give. If you can successfully separate the two, the mind and the body, and if you can stabilize your experiential understanding of the separation of the two, then when you go through the Parto stages, that's after death and before rebirth, because of this stabilized experiential understanding of the separation of mind and body, one would be able to shake out of the delusion that one will face in the Parto state. Right now, when we think about our physical body, we have this tendency of believing that this physical body means I or self. When you have a stabilized experiential understanding of the separation of the two, then you will acquire a thing called the wisdom of no self. And the mind is like the space, empty space. And if you look at a person and say to yourself, does this person really exist as an independently or inherently existing entity? In appearance, of course, there is a person, but in essence, there is no such thing as this person existing on its own without dependence on causes and conditions.
동생 시발사 송대 다 꿈종 방와사 꿈종 지는 강의를 되는 변화 동의 탑재 강림 중에 콩 대래 콩 강의들 레당 유목부에 코버 동의 집에 사원지 쥐었다버래 레지 따당부 이제 유목바래 유목바게 난 유목바 찌네 이렇게 레가 박차이 하는 다 받은 것도 박차이 이제 박차가 루들 된다버래 변화 루들 장이 나빠나 토르 다 레나바나도 가리 지나다 로르로 소치게 루데 가네 유모발스 송으레 이제 가면서 다 유모발 종으로 해서.
The second one is the origin or the source of our suffering. And Buddha teaches us to get rid of the causes and conditions that bring about pain and suffering. The culprit, the main causes are the afflictive emotions. Afflictive emotions, when we unleash them, we create karma. When we do it again and again, then it becomes a habituated tendency. And this habit of repeating the afflictive emotions again and again and again brings about this physical form. All individuals have different form, different shape, different looks, and these are the result of different types of karma created.
뉴 목발에 다 내가 강종이래. 다 감슴 로아르도 융아제나다 미달 플라타 하미가 적을지를 로아 융아 송고요래 배는 로아르도가 송고요래 배나 다 대탐체 배나고 행사를 사원다 바게 되더니 단종 탐지 용 이제 강래지나
다 레다 뉴모마지 레 뉴모파 다 레사네 다 용요레.
When you unleash afflictive emotions, these create karma. And the result is the 3 dhatus, or spoken differently, is the 6 realms of existence. Sometimes we call it 5 realms of existence. When we say 5 realms of existence, then we are lumping together 2 realms, that is the realm of gods and realm of demigods as one. So when you unleash negative emotions, it's just like spreading the seed in a fertile field.
베르나 신사다에 다 강리들 소소가 다 생기전들에 다 니는 앞에나 주뉴 못 봐서 요리 동대 제법 동해지 베나 야 아다당 소디 대와다 대외 조건에 사축 셈래 셈디는 삼축 셈래 삼년기에서 사축 셈다 깨대 시송나 원래 데려되니까 토리 system 다 question 하나서 봐 되고 레버가 볼 메소가 볼 개용 그요래 베나고 야 저 해당다 차도라서 봐 세나라서 봐는 그 디람 인거 그 다다 신사다 셈들이 디드는들이 저다니 원래 게임이야 뜻받지 않마다 저기가 보통 속발지 somne 게임 셈까지 삼년제 사축제 셈맥이 셈 따니고 봐 빼놓고 토마 마르바 원래 마르바 되랬더니 빼놓고 다 디목라 마르바지나 디목 되렇게 되니 디 dimde니가 dimde지고 마초는 고로는 빼놓고 데베죠 마초 드라마시 등에죠 마초 빵 마시라네 다 데르시네 다고 당니 총총제 등에 빼놓고 생근은 다 내래 다 dimde시 세베톨 뉴모가 끼마 다들 사우드 사는 효소는 대처를 늘리는데 레버 배우네 소리도 되더니 dimde니 지게 세베톨 뉴모가 끼마 다든 정랑지가 열에 아때때 행차도 사공체 받아온 거서 생근 나는 삼모야 보통 거 다다 dimde리 지우는 리사 뭐
I mentioned it's like spreading the seed in a fertile field. This fertile field-like thing is one's own mind, which is the ground. When you have the root cause of all suffering, when you have afflictive emotions in your mind stream, which is like a fertile field, then the result is suffering. We say happiness and causes of happiness. Happiness and causes of happiness is loving kindness and compassion of bodhicitta. When you have bodhicitta in your mind stream, the result is one's own rebirth in the 3 higher realms of existence or any of the pure lands, Buddha pure lands. When you spread white seeds, quote and unquote white seeds, the result will be the blooming of white flowers. If you have in your mind stream anger and stinginess, the result will be pain and suffering. Therefore, the Buddha teaches us to do not do anything which is non-virtuous, do everything that are virtuous. Everything starts off, all the pain and suffering come about. The origin of the pain and suffering is ignorance. When one has ignorance in one's mind stream, then one is not able to distinguish between right and wrong, virtue and non-virtue. So it is very important to kind of turn inwardly and look at the nature of one's own mind.
왜나 다당 속에 유무바 득득 nga dikpa chiam chunga she khu yore pela nga dikpa chetang lama tam che nga dikdup ka che yore dikpa ta dikpa tam ki kangri de yumu ba de re ta ki wa ngama ra ga kang che ba de je ba bu le de chu de che de thmik na gi yo yo me ji ba bu ne yumu ba de rang ge ju la ta le de yore ta ti sa bu ta ne de ne de ta jik ting ge di ro ro kang che na ji wa lang chana tini ti se yo le ngi tang dikdep la tini ki dunggek tang jongbo song tini deba na cha ta dunghe song ti ta se yo la ta tini ka le dewa ba tini ki ka kor na tini deba na cha ta dunghe la so pa ta tam chi yongbo yo re yo kin so ba kam ni ta ti me to deba sa wong ti ta kha ke yo ne ti dunghe na ba na so ta yongbo yo re lamsang chue de che wa de pe na tham che ba na gi yongbo yo ma de 서운이 유모가 세고 줄 내들 레버서 남식들이 각게 온 거요래.
Sometimes lamas are asked by individuals, what kind of non-virtue, accumulation of non-virtue do I have? Is it big? Is it small? These are the kind of questions one often gets asked. When we say obscurations or non-virtuous deeds, we are talking about really negative emotions or afflictive emotions. Whatever one had been in former lives, whatever kind of activities one engaged in previous lives is reflected on one's own mind stream in this life. A question one must ask oneself is, how much negative emotions do I have in my mind stream in this life? Now, these negative emotions or afflictive emotions are like the seeds which are spread in this fertile field like the ground mind stream of oneself. If you have these seeds of afflictive emotions, which are bound to create negative karma, and the result, the result with certainty is afflictive, is obscurations. And these bring about causes and conditions. Leng batan dictips ta ken nasata dunga so
re ta ji de ko no pe na mi ji da da jiang ma che dang ma me se ye yo na ta chen ji tin ka no jie chen na dang ko di de jum tu ju de we de ji ba jum tu de da ko ngo pe na
de gyu leng batan gyu leng
de ne tini tata da sasani ji dungguk dan jumbo te la so wata liga kon na pe na mgewe le la tini ji dungguk
dungge dan jumbo ben
de dan kak dan jumbo la so ta liba so tam che ra ani te la tini ko to da che dang long gu dan de pe to de he wi ma ro
if you have the as causes, if you have created negative karma which serve as the cause, a negative karma, accumulation of obscurations, and then engaging in non-virtuous deeds. These are going to serve as the causes and conditions. These coupled with the causes and conditions like the demonic influence, and influence bringing about by elemental spirits, etc., will then bring about disease, suffering, but disease, pain, and suffering. So, spoken a little bit differently, if one is faced with all kinds of pain, suffering, diseases, etc., etc., one must ask oneself, from where do these come? These are brought about by causes and conditions. These causes and conditions being the demons, elemental spirits. Now, who creates these demons and elemental spirits, these causes and conditions? It is the negative karma, accumulation of obscurations. Now, if you still backtrack and say, what created this negative karma and these obscurations, etc., and the real kind of source culprit is the afflictive emotions. So once a person has negative emotions and unleash in one's mind stream, then the result always is suffering. It's not like, a penalty or a judgment is passed in a court of law, tit for tat. No, it does not. That's not how karma ripens. It's not immediate. It's not like, immediate tit for tat, but nevertheless, karma will ripen.
당부 징이 받을 변화 나타다 등해라 되네 드리 대랑 종탈들이 레게벨라 변화 추소를 적다 봐변 드리 용거요 가시나 대양 변화 레당 기 남아나서 드리 예배되변나 어래 가시나 따지고 저 주다 주사주도 값세네야 앙딜라 기 남아나서 거네 양 딜변 나타다 등해라서 뭐 기는 양 변고 저 다음에 용어로 대탐제다 문제 레게 들이 제용을 때는 다다 우유기에 토끼에 변은 매게 닥군 작선 내바나 토미게 토바메 변고 나타다 등행 우보 매바이나 변나 강그 소나 대탐제 랑 레지 남바 매바 다티 고 행사 사원송하다고 돼 민구요 바데 디랑 그 촌나 오 땅이 기와도 밖에서 레전드 밤에 봐 세계 오래 있었네 디 동의를 받아 받아 그 가와다 그바고 빼나 디 시골에 빼나 어래 디 동다데 시선을 다 담게진 고주 망보 요로 다 담게라
Sometimes when you are faced with unfavorable causes and conditions like disease, sickness, or any kind of pain and suffering, these will serve as a reminder for oneself to enter the path of Dharma. And in which case, these causes and conditions, no matter how negative they may be, has served to be positive. But there are all kinds of different scenarios. You can be confronted with all kinds of different causes and conditions. Sometimes when you are in the middle of a Dharma practice, when you have embarked on a certain Dharma practice, one is prone especially to all kinds of mishaps, sickness, and impediments. All these things come about because of one's own past karma. What kind of these karmas? Some are tangible, others are intangible. The tangible ripening of karma would be like because of causes and conditions. If you come across a bandit, a robber, an enemy, someone who causes you physical harm, these are tangible obstacles or impediments. And then there are more kind of subtle and intangible ripening of karma as well. But in any case, whether these be tangible or intangible, for as long as the seed has been spread in the fertile field of one's own mind stream, and these seeds are surely to bear fruit. If you have a thorough understanding of how the causes and conditions work hand in hand, then one will not fear suffering, because one knows the nature of suffering. This will lead to understanding of many more profound things.
Angola da 강리드네 빼는데 뉴몬 바다 남그 뉴몬 바다 섬계를 해담게 빼나 다 데려지는 거서 대다 담게 동행에 따와 대다리 신에 다 되는 거 탑송을 해 빼나 거 탑송을 빼는데 먹이와 담게 나니 빼나 다 먹이와 절라 소바 대탑게 나니 제바포 강리드나 난 뉴몬 바래지 뉴몬 바 망고라 Then say the Nang new mobile send lay sacramary, lay masala never make you your marry. This and that or to my new mobile go rest.
Afflictive emotions and the negative karma, creation of negative karma, these can be prevented, and there are 3 different methods of their prevention. The prevention of engaging in the 10 non-virtuous actions, for example. That emotion which is responsible for engaging in the 10 non-virtuous actions would be the afflictive emotions. Where there are no afflictive emotions, there's no question of creating karma. Where karma is not created, there's no question of ripening the karma or the fruition.
Triti tata nang nyu mo bang pa ta ta ge song sub je de re je de lo pe na o rang ge he dang chi bo ju le yo pa ta ge nya bi dong he lo le nya bi dong he lam na o nya bi dong he de gang ni song de o je he dang ni song o je na ra ju tham chi ge ju la sa pa de ra ju le ta je he dang no de le ti ni nya ba ge dong he jong go yo le pe na 야, 예다라 소베동에 탐피 강라티니 좀 되는 배나 저 도차당 신라티니 좀아래 올래 될라티는 라주를 쳤다나 다다다 여다 메다 여도 여이지 말이 여니 마체게 다다야 동에 됐다 용지 말이 올래 용지 말아 마음 빠는 레지다 싸다 싸이지 말이 드니 정랑기는 다 마음으로만 정화라게 다 먹이와 잘라서 방시 받아 서먹이에 내 방시 봐 나유모 봐 뭐시 봐 되니 대다 거봐 못 방어서 사서
We are still talking about cessation of the truth of cessation of suffering. When you have anger, train the mind to understand that the nature of anger is the suffering in hell realm. From where do these suffering of hell arise? It is the anger that is apparent in one's own mind stream. So as soon as you sense anger arising in yourself, immediately equate that anger with the pain and suffering one faces in the realm of hell. What about the hungry ghosts? These hungry ghosts are there because we have the presence of attachment, desire, and stinginess in our mind stream. And these negative emotions are very much embedded in our mind stream. And because of these afflictive emotions, we are undergoing the suffering of hell as well as the hungry ghosts. And therefore, this will serve as a reminder and instill fear in yourself, saying that I must not engage in any of the 10 non-virtuous deeds. I must give up these practices. So outwardly you abandon or give up any kind of engagement in the 10 non-virtuous deeds, and inwardly you say to yourself that you want to give up generating negative emotions.
Teni teta nang yu mo pa ta sem ge wa la so pang chang na mang ba la teni de me jong wa de pe na de me jong we na xie wa so pe na ho le xi ji yang pe na di teni kam som de gang me je na pe na kam som tourism la so ba le je ne de ta je ge pe na tourism je de wa la so ba kho na ya yo de ma dong ni song som na je ge yo ma le 네, 되게 다 니 명대다 보고 살이 혹시 이거는 자동 방송으로 돼. 망발을 농하면 용변은 셔와서 시장 감성들 매제해. 감성들 제시 농한 요만하면 좋아 원래. 다른 한국변을 아무게 습지게 되지 빨라. 오늘 마서도 좀 감성 걸어는 걸 짠는 봐서 나한테 배짱 돈이 제반하기 이거 와로 배 벌써 보면 잔놈 받이나 잔놈 벌로 이 잔놈 봐 배선은 심벌왜 알바다 되는 감성은 막고는 배짱
잔놈 벌은 더바 강이신 무슨 말을 잔놈은 더바 강이신 무슨 말을 에 잔놈 벌
무릎지 못 자나 봐서 되나 답변나 원래
더 캥이
무릎 박hinne 배 대회 킹네 다른 배는 대배 대회도 봐 대회 킹네 해서 송고서네
제르부체 따라 백티 고된 콜순데 여발라 고페데 버수디 고티데 체첸 백그 라든 트럽이는 데는 마음발 백 동의 민중의 시와 용걸 순거라
이 특권을 받아 코를 다리 공리 하게 생각하면 특도시 다연의 컴퓨터는 셀랑 여러 거지
in the context we are still talking about the cessation of suffering. What Rinpoche is basically saying is outwardly now first recognition of, to recap it, recognition of what suffering is all about, the causes of suffering. Once the suffering is recognized, then we are going on to the cessation of suffering. How do we abandon the causes of this suffering? And then when you give up engaging in any of that's outwardly you abandon or give up engaging in non-virtuous deeds, 10 non-virtuous deeds, and inwardly say to yourself that I'm not going to generate negative emotions ever, because I know what is the root cause of my suffering. And now I am on the path to putting an end to pain and suffering, which means I have to cease to generate negative emotions. Now, if you can do these things in a sequential way, then you will be pacified. Shiva, the mind will be eased, mind will be pacified, because in that state of mind, then there will be no pain and suffering. So when you are born next, either in the three dhatus, or if you are born in the three higher realms of existence, there will be the opportunity to not only practice the insight that you have gained, but also there will be glimpses of peace and happiness. Tandi Rinpoche tama chu maso nye pekyu ngara gyurshab tile ngara yi mashib sur chaso de mao pala dunge minju wa tile shiwa de chinje kamsum kebi nere tori sum kebi nere dewa yor suma jorwa
kebar minjurwe kamsum kebar minjurwe jano ba aso khobale thate nyangdeje re tadi do dina pena to 다 마음벌때 중인 중주메와 가래 영인이 대비사 사지에 사송고 요르바 사지에 사송의 양 빼라 따따다 동진이 해요나 되니 양 사축 선바탐 지sem지 동을 뵙기 요래 빼나 올래 되니 지진이다
다르부 쳇지 동에 매당까 동에 기대 맞지
그래
군중 기대 맞지
군중 기대 말에
고백 간다 여러분
고백대 말에
고대 제탑이 있는 데는 백교네 감지기 배사를 시월리고 수고만 주변
송도 별나데 냐데제 살아 대발 생비 니 빠른 용화송 단 코바는 니 빠른 용화송 되네 은혜 단 코바도 하죠 탈게 요리와 코바를 탈 송나 니도 답변은 내가 강리진에 변나지 코바를 탈 송나 양 다당서 자tuk 산지가 산이 양 심지 등 제거요래 코바를 탈 송나 kontuji ang te kona kontu ta dungi tsawa nime wa te na lama gewe shini mangpo pepu yore ang tere te samchi pe na zuku niji doga ten se pa ha de dungu po sanji sa tere dungi yore ma le ole nyang te ji sar sine le bari ni pan jong wa so ko bari ngim jong jong ko bari ngim jong jong ni pan jong wa de da ko bari ngini ta to ko yore ma ni pan jong wa so 거기 기본 보지 선 거를 딱 고등아 안에 좀 들어 그래 동네 랍거 와나
다다 고베 대바다 데리어로
리 고베 대바다 데리어 이반 종화지 다디 남제 대바다 요로 이지라
Now in context it appears like of the four truths we talked about, the recognition of suffering, truth of suffering, and the next one is the causes or the source of this suffering. And then we talked about the cessation of the very cause or causes of these sufferings. So sequentially, if you first recognize suffering, then recognize the source of this suffering, then go on to putting an end to the very cause of these sufferings. And that is the time when you will have a feeling of revulsion. It's when you look at samsara, when you think samsara, it is going to be of distaste. It is going to be something that you want to turn away from, not something that is going to be attractive. And when you have this revulsion, that's the time when you are liberated from samsara. And then, of course, Rinpoche adds that, if you call that liberation, then some skeptics might say, well, how about lamas being reborn and going through the cyclic existence? What does this mean? But that, you see, is a whole new kind of subject. It is choosing to be reborn in samsara in order to benefit sentient beings is different from having no choice, no option, but to be born because of one's own past karma. Yes.
Penandi khoba shibale penata tang su mi tamje nangna semji tamje nangna diri khara gyushini chi ba yogore de tamje nang so khoba ba dungi ba dina khol dungi zela maybe dungi 총총 dungi 치모 통고 요래 ole 디다고 동 대방 통신이 미치나 코비 등에 tamche pena 코바 내장 코비 중지 마을 바데 원래 강사 산쪽 선바데 얘네 정도 등에 tamche mell람 따면 통고 요래 되나 기선에 드린 것도 등에 요 말에 파디는 다디는 우보 따지나 뭐또 등에 냠도 용을 따르는 로봇 등고 요래 빼나 좀 상는 라마기미 진이 요거리 것도 등에 요 말에 되나 우보 생고들이 내로다 동해 tamche 말함전 통고 요래 원래 홍가 샘지 동을 페페 등해당 마소 레당 무문배 등에 용안이 가까이 빼나 원래 뒤다버서 딱 그러면 동해 탈들이 같이 로차 왜서나 대양 드게요 말에 디 스파르 모터 해바르 메네송 사주선 담자 되려와 원래 다 탑승과 같이 로디나 때라 거주 대 고야 볼링 거래. 근데 다다 동네 탈들이 탈로고 와. 디마베.
Cyclic existence. Now, when we talk about liberation from cyclic existence, now, for example, among sentient beings, there are many spiritual masters. As a samsaric being with a lot of negative emotions, etc., we ordinary sentient beings, when we confront a small kind of pain and suffering, it completely overwhelms us because we cannot cope with it. That is because we do not have a full understanding of how things are. But the sublime ones who have chosen to be in samsaric existence in order to help other beings, they, although seemingly going through the same kind of trials and tribulations that we are, in comparison, they are unaffected by the pain and suffering that they seemingly go through just like we ourselves do. To the bodhisattvas who are in cyclic existence by their choosing and who seemingly go through the same kind of trials and tribulation, to them all these pain and sufferings would seem like a dream. Well, the question might arise, what about the lamas who are just like any other ordinary in cyclic existence, who are in the same situation like yourself, and what about their pain and suffering? The kind of pain and suffering the lamas and the sublime beings seemingly go through, and the kind of pain and suffering that we go through because of our negative karma and because of our afflictive emotions, these two would be vastly different. The pledge of the bodhisattvas, for example, they make two pledges. One, I shall not be deluded in samsara. I shall not be affected by the samsaric delusions, nor will I be affected by the attachment there seemingly is to nirvana. So bodhisattvas are unaffected by these two extremes, suffering of samsara and the peace of nirvana.
Tani lam jawar saso tati de uso lam jina tani soso jiwani pabanese role lam chang. Lam tira tani marikpa nyumokpa ipo marikpa nyumokpa nyumor chobe rikpa chang, rikpa lam rikpa so simsin ji malokpa yangta par jongwe rikpa so. 다들 남는 일이다 그래서 다 당번디 점주도 많이 송대 빼는 다고 로도 나바 열었더니 단동 저 사주 선배사들이 상하사 소장하 섬을 남는더니 당몰리 당보 빠지나 소설 타바랑 미송게 동에는 적네 빼나 먹이와 빵이 요래 바드 들이 빼나디 차당이 와서 자네 오 습기 탐지 파마인 바시네 이 탐실라 삼류제 사축을 세우는 보시기는 얘는 차당기나 자용을 요래 빼나 사축 선배사를 내고 요래 근데 사축 선배사를 내면 원래 차당된 유문 바타를 샘티내로 통고 요래 원래 신뢰는 합성 통나 근데 라지 탐지 대직님 보여 봐 당 근데 샘티 탐지 그 평강 대비 딱 벌하기 원래 근데 대다 하고는 근데 마글라면 빼나 요래더니 상지살을 놓고 요래 빼나테 람그는 봐 내리래 소소지원이 바꿔 살 때도 와서 라우는 봤으면 되더니 무슨
Next one is the truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering. When we say path, it's the path starting from the path of an ordinary being right to the path of an arhat or an ascended master. Path is when marikpa or ignorance is turned into rikpa or awareness. The path is putting the mistaken mind into a state of not mistaken. The path starts from the taking of refuge ordination. The path leads to the four mind reversals. The path goes on to the self-liberation vows. Self-liberation vows taken because one fears the consequence of one's rebirth in samsara. This leads one notch higher into the bodhisattva ordination. Bodhisattva ordination is one who is free from attachment and aversion, but will practice equanimity. One who would recognize all sentient beings as one's own parents, treating all as equal to oneself. When you have bodhicitta, relative bodhicitta in your heart, when you extend that bodhicitta to all sentient beings, it purifies one's own state of mind, which will then enable one to embark on the practice of tantric ordination, which means that loving kindness and compassion will enable one to have experiential understanding of the true nature of one's own mind, which means leading one from the shamatha meditation to vipassana or the insight meditation and seeing the true nature of one's own mind. and recognition that the aggregates, the elements, the sense basis of all sentient beings are primordially pure, and that all have the Buddha nature. So these are the three different paths.
The requiring to break body, Tito new Mubagati, she not new person, Dupper break bar, oh, Tita Dupper break there, did a Dupper break there, something timber, whatever there. Oh, Yin and Dupa Tongue, Tan the Gumari, the team break bar, the father, oh, Tita Dupper break, Dupper break there. What they didn't degree, they didn't take a marriage, they did a party, don't they? Or Marippa, you mobility, Chow move party, Marip party, to which party you are, you move, Chow move at some chicken, Niborchupa, ole, move at the Sawatam chicken, Niborchupe, Nipari, or
Rinpoche says, in this particular context, the Tibetan words rikpa and marikpa also means appropriate, not appropriate. So when it says rikpa, it is appropriate to do what is virtuous. Marikpa, it is inappropriate to do non-virtuous deeds. So in certain contexts, Marik can also mean appropriate, not appropriate, correct, not correct.
And the same thing, young Taparjo, the Bad, telling Hova that Nadi just Sarsambar Sepena, Nipan Jimba, or telling young Comating, young thinking, Jing, Nipan Jimba, and the Petek. All that in it. I do your portrait. I don't know. Then I'll be taking away him and clean boot and they will come somebody.
So then, in summary, then when you have all these kind of understanding in a sequential way, all the four noble truths, then mind will be able to do all the things correctly and refrain from doing the things that are incorrect, and mind will turn to all the sublime practices in conformity with the teachings. So this is a kind of concise teaching on the essence meaning of the Four Noble Truths. And Rinpoche says, if one aspires to have kind of more in-depth, then of course we have Khenpo Rinpoche here.
Dewa Chenje Chave
Be